Before we start, I suggest you go grab your notes and writing tools because this will be a long video and there are many important points that you need to note down. And trust me, it's complicated and you might want to replay this video a few more times. So click pause here if you do not have your notebook and writing tools yet. Okay, young embryo implants and develops into fetus in uterus. However, that does not mean this organ is receptive to implantation all the time. No. In contrary, it's only receptive for a brief period of each month. This brief interval coincides exactly with the time when a fertilized egg would begin to implant. Well, approximately about 7 days post-ovulation. The uterine or the menstrual cycle is a series of cyclic changes that the endometrium has to go through each month as it responds to the changing blood levels of ovarian hormones previously described. The cyclic production of estrogen and progesterone by the ovaries will in turn regulate the level of FSH and LH. Generally speaking, both female cycles, ovarian cycles and the menstrual cycles, are about 28 days long, and ovulation occurs typically midway through the cycle. There are 3 parts of menstrual cycles. The first part is day 0 to day 4, which is the menstrual phase. In this phase, superficial functional layer of the endometrium is sloughing off or detaching from the uterine wall, and the detached tissue and blood pass through the vagina as the menstrual flow or the period for 3 to 5 days. And the average blood loss is approximately 50 to 150 milliliters. By the 4th day, ovarian follicles are beginning to produce more estrogen. The second part happens on day 5 to 14, which is the proliferative phase. In this phase, the rise of estrogen level produced by the growing follicles of the ovaries stimulates the regeneration of the functional layer of the endometrium. The glands will be formed in it, and also the blood supply will be increased. This causes the endometrium to be velvety, thick, and well vascularized. The ovulation occurs at the end of this stage in response to a surge of LH in the blood. At this stage, the ovulated oocyte is still surrounded by the follicle cell capsule called corona radiata. Some may experience a twinge of abdominal pain in the lower abdomen when ovulation happens. The phenomenon is what we call Mittelsmers, and the precise cause is, unknown, but it may include an intense stretching of the ovarian wall that leads up to ovulation and irritation of the peritoneum by a small amount of fluid released by the rupture of follicle. Please do remember this, as this information will become important when we are talking about the fertilization later. The third phase is from day 15 to day 28, and we call it as a secretory phase. In this phase, the progesterone level will rise following the ovulation that happens at the end of proliferative phase. This will act on the endometrium, and it will increases the blood supply even more. The glands within will also grow and begin secreting nutrients to the uterine cavity, which will help to sustain the embryo, if present, until it has been implanted. There are 2 cases here. If fertilization does occur, the embryo produces a hormone similar to the LH, and this will cause the corpus luteum to continue producing progesterone until the placenta can take over this role. The second case is if the fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum will degenerate towards the end of this period as the LH blood level declines. And the lack of ovarian hormones in the blood causes the blood vessels supplying the functional layer of the endometrium to go into spasms and kink. When deprived of oxygen and nutrients, the endometrial cells will begin to die, which sets the stage for the menses to start again on day 28. Please, however, note that this explanation is under the assumption that the menstrual cycle is happening in a 28-day cycle. In reality, the cycle can be different in length, as it can be as short as 21 days, but can be as long as 40 days. Only one interval is fairly constant in all females. That is, the time from the ovulation to the beginning of the menses. That's almost always 14 to 15 days. Everything starts with fertilization of oocyte by the sperm, and the result of this process is what we call zygote, which will then develop itself into embryo and later into fetus, which is a complex human being consisting of 1 trillion cells. The detailed version of the development of an embryo into fetus are very complex and can completely fill a thick big book. And in this video, we will only be covering the important events of pregnancy and embryonic development. But before we actually talk about this, there are some terms that you need to get familiar with before we go and learn about this event. First is the pregnancy. Pregnancy is referring to the events that occurs from the time of fertilization or the conception until the birth. Conceptus, it refers to the pregnant women's developing offspring. And from week 1 to week 8, conceptus is called embryo, while from week 9 until the birth, it's called fetus. The third is a gestation, which refers to the development phase, and it extends by convention the last menstrual period until birth, approximately about 280 days. Speaking about sperm, sperm is a motile cells that can propel themselves by rolling their tails. In order for fertilization to occur, the sperm must reach the oocyte by swimming upwards through the vagina and uterus to reach the uterine tube. Note that the oocyte would be viable only for 12 hours to 24 hours after ovulation. The sperm, however, retains their fertilizing power inside the female reproductive tract for approximately 5 days after ejaculation. Consequently, for the fertilization to occur, sexual intercourse must occur no more than 2 days before the ovulations and no more than 24 hours after. At this point, the oocyte is approximately 1/3 of the way down the uterine tube. If the sperm are deposited in the female's vagina at the approximate time of ovulation, they are attracted to the oocyte by chemicals that act as a homing device, allowing them to locate the oocyte itself. It takes approximately 1 to 2 hours for the sperm to complete the journey of the female duct system into the uterine tubes, even if the distance is only 12 centimeters. Millions of the sperms leaks out from the vagina, and millions of those that remain inside will be destroyed by the vagina's acidic environment. Only a few hundred or, few thousand, up to few thousand, can actually reach the oocyte vicinity. When the swarming sperm reach the oocyte, the enzyme on the cell surface will break down the cement that holds the follicle cells of the corona radiata together around the oocyte. Once the path has been cleared through the corona, the sperm will undergo a acrosomal reaction which will peel off the acrosomal membrane within the head of the sperm and this will lead to the release of the enzymes to digest holes in the surrounding oocyte membrane. When the oocyte membrane is sufficiently damaged, sufficiently weakened, a single sperm makes contact with one of the oocyte's membrane receptor for the sperm. The nucleus of the sperm will fuse into the oocyte membrane, and the content will enter the oocyte cytoplasm. The sperm that are in the best position to be fertilizing are the one that comes along after hundreds of sperms have undergone acrosomal reactions to expose the oocyte membrane. Once a single sperm penetrates into the oocyte nucleus completes the meiotic division procedure, and it forms ovum, and shed the rest of its membrane receptor for the sperm, so that there will be no more sperm that can get inside. When the ovum is formed, it has 23 chromosomes, and it will be combined with the 23 from the sperms to form a zygote, which represents the first cell of the new individual. As the zygote journeys down the uterine tube, it begins to undergo mitotic cell divisions, forming 2 cells, and then 4, and so on. This stage is what we call cleavage. Normally, there has to be enough time after cell division in order to wait for the new cells to grow, to be mature, to be complete before the next division occurs. However, in this case, there is not much time for cell growth between division. Hence, the size of the cells is getting smaller and smaller. This will provide a large number of cells to construct an embryo. This is an important event though. And so, I would like to take a moment and use an analogy to capture the importance of this process. Imagine you want to construct a building, but you will be using one big block of granite. It won't be easy to work with, to make for us. Well, compare it to when you have access to hundreds of brick-sized granites. You would have easier time to construct a building the way you want. You easily move it, you can easily work with it. The same goes for zygote. In order to form embryo, it would be easier for them if the cell sizes are small. By the time the developing embryo reaches the uterus, it's about 3 days post-ovulation, or day 17 on the female's cycle. It enters a stage we call morula. This morula structure is a tiny ball consisting of 16 cells that looks like a raspberry in microscopic size. At this stage, the endometrium of the uterine is still not ready to receive the embryo. So the embryo is floating around the uterine cavity and sustaining itself using the uterine secretion as the temporary source of nutrients. It will be in this stage until it reaches approximately 100 cells, and then it will form this wall-like structure with a hollow space inside. We call it blastocyst. At the same time, it secretes an LH-like hormone to prod or to force the corpus luteum to continue producing hormones. Otherwise, the endometrium will start sloughing off and proceeds into menstrual cycle. Many home pregnancy tests are designed to detect these LH-like hormones in female's urine. So the blastocyst has 2 important functional areas. We have the thromboblast that forms the large fluid-shaped sphere, and we also have the inner cell mass, which is a small cluster of cells on one side. By day 7 post-ovulation, the blastocyst has attached itself into the endometrium and eroded away a lining in a small area, embedding itself into a thick, velvety mucosa. This attachment process is happening as the development is continuing, well, 3 primary germ layers are being formed by the inner cell mass. The primary germ layers are ectoderm, which will become the nervous system and the epidermis of the skin, endoderm, which will form the mucosae and associated glands, and the mesoderm, which will become everything else. The implantation has been completed by this stage, and the uterine mucosa has grown over the burrow in 14 days post-ovulation, the day when the female would normally be expecting her menses. After securely implanted, the trophoblast will develop elaborate projection or chorionic villi, which will combine with the tissue of the mother's uterus to form placenta. Once the placenta has been formed, the plate-like embryonic body, now surrounded by the fluid-filled sac called amnion, and it's attached to the placenta by a blood vessel containing stalk of tissue. We call this umbilical cord. By the 3rd week, the placenta is functioning to deliver the nutrients and oxygen, as well as removing all waste products from the embryonic blood. And all this happens through the placental barrier. By the 2nd month of pregnancy, the placenta has become an organ that is capable of producing estrogens, progesterone, and some other that helps to maintain pregnancy. At this time point, corpus luteum of the ovary will be inactivated and degenerates. By the 8th week of embryonic development, all the required works have been done. All the organ system have been laid down, at least in a rudimentary form, and the embryo looks like a human. And beginning on the 9th week, we refer the embryo as a fetus. And from this point onwards, growth and organ specializations along with changes in body proportions will happen. By approximately 270 days post-fertilization, the fetus is said to be full term and is ready to be born. Here are some additional explanations about what's actually happening starting from the 8th week up till the end of the 9th month. This is optional, but it might be good for you to know about it. Pause the video as needed, especially if you need time to read the changes that is listed next to the image. The ability of the uterus to enlarge from pear or fist-sized organs to the point that it occupies most of the pelvic cavity by 16 weeks cannot be described with a word less than remarkable. As the pregnancy continues, the uterus pushes higher to the abdominal cavity, and as the birth gets near, the uterus reaches to the point of xiphoid process and occupies bulk of abdominal cavity. The abdominal organ will be pressed superiorly against the diaphragm, which then intrudes into the thoracic cavity. This will result in ribs being flat, causing the widening of the thorax. This will also impact the female's center of gravity and may, in many cases, lead to lordosis. It's often accompanied by the backache during the last few months of pregnancy. The placenta will also release a hormone called relaxin to make the pelvic ligaments and the pubic symphysis to relax, widen, and to become more flexible. And this in turn will increase the width of the birth canal to ease the birth passage. Nutritional need-wise, the expression "pregnant women is eating for two" Encourage many to eat twice the amount of food needed during the pregnancy. This will lead to excessive weight gains. Actually, pregnant women need only about 300 extra calories daily. It should be emphasized that pregnant women should be on high quality nutrition, not just more calories. Some other physiological changes are also in order. In relation with the gastrointestinal system, many pregnant women suffer from nausea, or commonly referred as morning sickness, during the first few months of pregnancy, until the system completely adjusts to the elevated estrogen and progesterone level. Heartburn is the most common symptoms due to the displaced esophagus and squeezed stomach because, the size of growing uterus. Another common problem is the constipation due to the decline in the motility of the digestive tract during the pregnancy, which is once again due to being squeezed by the uterus expansion. In relation with the urinary system, the kidneys have additional burden, that is disposing the fetal metabolic waste, forcing them to produce more urine. The uterus squeezes the bladder, causing more frequent urination, and sometimes it can become uncontrollable, which we call stress incontinence. In relation with the respiratory system, the nasal mucosa becomes swollen and congested due to the elevated estrogen level. And this causes stuffiness and, occasional nosebleed may occur. Vital capacity of the lungs and respiratory rate will also increase, but residual volume will decline. And many exhibited dyspnea, which is the difficulty to breathe. And this happens during the later stage of pregnancy. In relation with the cardiovascular system, the total body water rises and the blood volume will also rise somewhere between 25 to 40% to accommodate for the additional needs of the fetus. This will act as a safeguard against the blood loss during the childbirth. The blood pressure and pulse will also rise. The cardiac output will increase by 20 to 40% to help propel greater blood volume around the body. Due to the uterus pressing on the pelvic blood vessels, the venous return from the lower limb may be impaired, and this will result in varicose or enlarged and twisted veins that leads to the swollen ankle and swollen feet. Now, there are several ways actually to control the birth, and to make it short, the following flowchart contains different contraception or birth control techniques, and also some products that are currently available that can help block the reproductive processes. It doesn't matter which technique that will be used. Dependability and proper timely use are the most important aspects of the birth control. Pause this video over here in case you need to look over these techniques or products that we can use to control the birth. Well, now you know about how our reproductive system is working. The two systems, from both male and female, they must work together to produce a new life. You have taken a look at a very remarkable process of two gametes merging into one to create a whole new life, starting with a single cell that is capable of growing into multicellular being that is us here. It's not an easy process to sustain pregnancy for 9 months. There are a lot of things happening physiologically, mentally, and it can be quite hard for female, even more during the childbirth. Therefore, please do try to understand, help, and most importantly, respect each other. Alright, so I guess that's it for now. Please do rewatch this video over and over as much as you need. Take lots of notes to help you to go through this material. It's not an easy one. If you have any questions, as usual, send it to my chat box on Microsoft Teams, or you could ask away during the class. Well then, I will see you in the next video.